Welcome back. Once again, I'm here today with my friend Jeannette, educator, and going into her master's of social work. Jeannette and I are having a series of conversations around habit evolution and how we actually come to get our habits to evolve and what strategies we use, and then what happens as our habits begin to evolve. What's the result of those habits evolving? So today we were going to talk about just the idea that our world right now is like, it feels like it's filled with these trite quotes, like these, be the best, be your best self, be the change you want to see in the world, all those really high aspiring quotes. And we were going to talk about how we could dissect our favorites and find their deeper meaning and how to use those inspirations, how to use someone else's really concise ability to write something down in one sentence or one phrase from their own experience, and how we can take that and let it help us. So did you have a quote, Jeannette, that you lean on?
I have a bunch of quotes. Actually, that's part of my process for reflection, and usually they come to me throughout the week, and I write them down and use them as an anchor for my writing. So I thought we could look at some of the ones that I like, or we could go through some of the ones that you like, whichever suits you.
Yeah. Well, give us one to start with, and let's go there. And then we'll just banter back and forth around each of these quotes that we're bringing to the table in terms of how we can see them and use them for our own good.
It's a big one, and it's only 5 words, but I love Rumi. I think for me, this poet kind of encapsulates what it means to be human. So my soul is my guide. That's the quote I just love. It reminds me to head back to my own awareness. So pretty simple, but.
And it is so easy, isn't it? My soul is my guide. I imagine, like, I mean, whenever you imagine someone like Rumi, you imagine a man totally undistracted by the distractions of the external world. And you imagine someone who is really in tune with his own soul and the guidance that that soul is giving him. And for me, I really feel like that the invitation of that quote is to not be distracted, is to return inward, to always come back to what's going on inside of you.
This is an experimentation. We use that word quite a lot in the Year of You, and discovering what our comfort zone looks like, where we're on the edge of it, where we don't feel so much fear that we need to return to home base, but that we're sort of exploring how we're going to implement and practice our habits, how we're going to negotiate our world. And what I find is this quote anchors me in that basic premise of, oh yeah, right, it is all inside of me. The answer to the question, the intuitive knowing, it's there. Mm-hmm. I just have to remind myself that there are external distractions and that my mind can get in the way, and remind myself that all the knowledge that I have is already there, right? Like everything I need to know is already there, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And as soon as you touch base with that idea, then there's a sense of wholeness, a sense of worthiness, a sense of I've got this. Just like there's something that rises from that connection.
Yeah, it's a foundation. I can actually visualize a strong concrete structure under my feet when I about that quote.
I always say that the dirty little secret of the Year of You is that it's not about the habits. And this is almost like what we're talking about here, is that this connection that you're referencing through this quote is almost like this is our goal. So can you speak to me about how the habits that you're curating help support this quote?
Well, we just sort of passed that message back and forth. I had this kind of mind-blown moment where I said, these small habits that we're practicing are opening our awareness so that we're able to become more intuitive in our daily lives in general. I think from the very micro level, you know, to this macro level, that is how we interact with the world around us as well, and the social structures that constrain us even, right? That we're practicing this in small and very intentional ways, but that ripple effect, it's I don't know, it's a default process almost. That's where I'm starting to get so incredibly excited, because things are just clicking into place that I would think would have more effort associated with them, because practicing these daily habits has effort right now. I'm still learning what works for me, what doesn't. And so I keep expecting these larger things to be very effortful. And what I'm finding is, in developing this sense of confidence in how I'm applying our habits, I'm finding a greater confidence in negotiating my life in a broader sense.
Yeah. Okay, so you hit on one, and I want to just bring it up this week. The one that you've hit on in yourself this week is the idea that silence and solitude needs to have a very anchored place in your life, because you love dialogue and engagement.
Yeah.
And that dialogue and engagement is enriching for you and is purposeful for you and is really essential to your life. And in order for that to have its proper place in your life, there needs to be this balancing place of silence and solitude.
A lot more than I thought, actually, because I would have said that connecting with others and service, I'm going into an MSW program, so service is, you know, that cornerstone, that big foundation of my life. And it is my life's purpose, but I need that silence and solitude to anchor that purpose, to guide it, to drive it. And so that I remain, what word am I looking for? I remain confident in my actions, I guess is a good way to put it, right? Because I'm checking in.
And you know that your actions are being driven from that, my soul is my guide.
Yeah.
Rather than my actions are being driven by some other stimulus in your life.
Yeah, and I can give you 1,000 examples, anything from, you know, whether or not you're deciding what to buy for groceries, versus right down to what apartment you're going to rent to. There are so many ways in which I can get bogged down in the what if, in the decision-making process, and old patterns start to form that are, you know, where I'm less confident. But I'm finding in the process of doing the work in our year review course that I'm very quickly and easily able to go back to, no, I know what I need. It's not always what I want, but I know what I need.
Yeah.
And there isn't any distraction in that space. And that's where sitting in silence and solitude gives me that anchor, where I get to hear that inner voice that says, you already know the answer to this question, Jeanette.
You already know the answer to this question. I like how you said it's not necessarily what I want, but it's what I need. And therein lies our choice piece, right? Is that all of a sudden you are not on just default mode and how you're running through your patterns in your life, but you're noticing each choice and how that choice serves the need.
Which is the scientist in us. I love that. It is. We are, and because I think that's another one of our secrets, is that we're not going to be perfect at this.
Yeah.
I don't think perfection is the goal ever in life. I think it's experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I think yoga says, like, have the goal for sure, but don't make the journey so awful that when you get to the goal, you're like, well, this doesn't really feel like what I wanted it to feel like when I got here. Like, the journey has to be something that you do in contentment, that you do with some sense of ease, that has some enthusiasm and joy to it.
Do you think there's any goal that you've ever accomplished that was accomplished in perfection?
No. Well, and that's what they say when they talk to entrepreneurs and stuff. It's like, how did you succeed? And then usually they have all these stories of failure, and every failure taught them something. And we find that so many times in our habit evolution as well, is just like this idea that, we start trying to make a change and it's going okay. And we think that we're seeing some good results and everything like that. And then we go on vacation, or our kid gets sick, or work gets really busy, and you fall off your habit. And in falling off the habit, in failing, it's like all of a sudden you learn, like you just learn what's at stake, because all of the repercussions of not having the habit becomes so apparent to you. Yeah.
We call that the pivot in the entrepreneurship field.
Yeah.
And there are so many pivots. Yeah. So I think if we look at it from I was thinking about something while you're speaking. If you look at it from a very simple perspective of establishing one habit in your life, going to bed earlier,
mm-hmm.
and nothing else changes in our life. We don't add anything else. But noticing what happens when we do go to bed earlier,
mm-hmm.
and then tapping into that intuitive knowledge about what happens when we go to bed earlier, when we wake up in the morning, when we go to bed the next night, and so forth. And then go to bed late and see what happens and how that, and that's just one habit. When you're able to implement, as many as you can into your life, what I notice is it's almost like a domino effect. You can see where even just consecutively not following through on any of the habits, you notice a huge difference in how you feel, and in energy, in joy, in I don't know, just presence in life. So I think that's when you say habit evolution, that's what I hear. Is I haven't established all 10 habits 7 days a week, every single day. It's there. I've tried, because I'm a perfectionist and a people pleaser and all kinds of things, but then I've pulled back, because obviously the data I've received has been, whoa, not good for you. So I'm slowly pulling these back into my life, and what I find is when I anchor one and it settles and it stays there, it expands my ability to anchor another habit.
I love how you're able to articulate it, Jeannette, because that's what is so hard about it, isn't it? It's like the ability to articulate how something small has a big ripple effect.
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't have said it, really truly understood it, until I went through the process of not doing it.
All of us. I think we've all learned as much from that fail piece when we suck at it as we did from the days that it's good. And the days that we suck at it teach us why we want it so badly in our lives. Yeah.
But it's a juxtaposition too, right? Because it's almost jarring for me, if in some ways, with some of these habits that are now so ingrained with me, that it's jarring when I jump off that habit wagon.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's not, oh, I have to, that checkbox, right? Oh, I have to get back to this. It's, oh my gosh, I need to get back to this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So if that quote, the Rumi quote, let my soul be my guide, is about soul, and yoga talks about the union of mind, body, soul, I want to introduce another quote here, and it's one of my favorite young Canadian poets, Rupi Kaur, and she says that she has a little tiny poem that is, "And I said to my body softly, I want to be your friend. It took a long breath and replied, I've been waiting my whole life for this." And to me, that quote is about the body part of all of these habits. It's about the fact that this body that we are in, we can fight against it, which it feels like we do in so many ways in our world. We think it's not perfect. We blame it for things. We're mad at it when it lets us down, or we don't have energy, or we get sick or something. And it's almost like we don't feel like we're on the same team. But yoga says when we can be on the same team as our body, then we are coming into congruency, coming into health.
Well, I don't think you can separate any of the three without there being a lack of health.
Yeah.
So for me, that quote is actually one of my favorites, and one that I've used. I come from a very interesting perspective, not, I would say, a unique, but coming home to my body was part of the trauma work that I did in therapy. after some very difficult circumstances in my life. And I was very distant from my body because it was telling me things I didn't have the capacity to hear. And so and yoga became a very big part of my healing process before even formal therapy, with you, actually. And that's where I first made my connection between mind, heart, and spirit, was doing yoga and anchoring myself back into my body and recognizing that this body is such an amazing construction. It's such a miracle. And we do that. We look at our wrinkles, or we look at, I'm aging, I'm 50, and the skin that's no longer taut, and that kind of thing. And one of the habits that we practice is body oiling, which I found incredibly important in my life, because my goal when I'm oiling is not necessarily to focus on those things I wish I could change. It's to have gratitude for all the pieces of me that have sustained me to this present moment, and how much of a miracle that is. And the gratitude for my level of health and wellness too. So yeah.
It is interesting. And I think you hit on something when you said part of my recovery was recovering of trauma and investing in this idea of listening to my body, this idea of my body as part of me. Because I think there is a big disconnect in our world, and a lot of it is created by trauma, where it's like something happens to us, and because the current situation doesn't make it safe for us to process that particular trauma, it gets stored. Yoga calls that word samskara. It gets stored as an experience in your cellular body. And then what happens is when you get to a place where your body goes, I think she's safe. And we can relate to this. I think of a time that I went into the ditch with my kids, and I was below the level of cars passing on the road, so they couldn't see me. And so I left my kids strapped in their car seat and hiked up and flagged down someone to help. And the whole time I'm in stress response, and I don't get to cry and worry about that situation and process that situation until I'm safe, until I'm back up on the highway, until I've driven all the way home, until I fall into the arms of my husband and these kids are safe. And then I just bawl. And what happens in our world is we never let ourselves have that moment where we're going to bawl. And the trauma, it wants to come out. It wants to be experienced. It wants to be released. And yet it feels, in so many ways, that feels very dangerous. We don't want to have that emotion come back up again. And so we stuff it down. And so the body is giving you these signals, in emotions or feelings or whatever. And it could be a trauma from forever ago. It could be a trauma that you don't even remember, or you don't even have a conscious connection between the emotion that's happening and the actual trauma. But that's the kind of stuff we're trying to connect with, to create this safe space so that these traumas can be released.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I would say to add on to that we are taught to disregard. And I'm going to jump on the feminist wagon and say, as women, we're taught to disregard what our body is telling us. Because there are so many structures in our society, and I can only speak to our Western society, but in our society and in the media and in our upbringing and in our jobs, that are telling us what is inappropriate, what responses are actually appropriate. So we disconnect from what intuitively is our appropriate bodily process. And in doing that, we disconnect from our spiritual understanding of the world.
Yeah.
So we're stuck in that mind space of, I love the quote that you had that talked about the negative committee. I can't remember it word for word, but I remember thinking, yeah.
Tell the negative committee in your mind to sit down and shut up, or something like that. Yeah.
Because unfortunately, it is part of how we are socialized as well. And it's not just women. Men are taught different messages, but they're still taught in a lot of ways, this whole concept of toxic masculinity, I guess, like you can, if you want to use a buzzword, they're taught ways to disconnect from their bodily experience as well. And people who don't even, I mean, and imagine people who don't register or have a feeling of being binary at all. They have no language to express themselves, and their bodily experience is actually being not just told to be suppressed, but the opposite. They're being told that it is not appropriate. It's
not real.
It's not real.
Not allowed. Yeah.
I think it's a good word.
Yeah. I even think about women's monthly cycle and how we live in a world where we expect ourselves and we expect of ourselves to have this really consistent, regular, daily energy and daily ability to have the same emotions and the same productivity and the same energy levels every day. And yet in a woman's body, our energy levels fluctuate according to our monthly cycle. And yet we've never been taught about it. We've never been taught to honor it, to listen to it, to hone in on what it's asking of us. And so there's a whole piece in there too of this listen to your body. But I think what you said is right, is that it's almost like this body is a conduit then. It's a portal of entry to that connection to soul.
Agreed.
Yeah. So if there was another quote, if I give you one more, this one's more around the brain. And I actually don't know if I'm going to have it like fast enough at my fingertips. But it's the idea that when we say, I don't know what I need. I'm going to try to remember the quote. When someone says, I don't know what to do, more often than not, they do know what to do, but the price of their truth is too high a price to pay. And I think of that in terms of our ego brain not allowing our deeper truth to be true because of the social costs or the relationship costs or the disruption of patterns in our life. So that I'll say the quote again. When people say to me, I don't know what to do, more often than not, they do. It's just that the price of their truth is too high a cost in their current life.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about Deborah Adele, because I wrote down the quote after hearing your video, or watching your video, I should say, sorry. And I think she uses the word realness, and that caught me, because I don't believe we live in a culture that values realness. Authenticity, I guess, would be the word I would use, or vulnerability for that matter, which is really the cornerstone of authenticity. And so I think we do weigh the cost. And if we don't, then we have to be ready to stand strong in the backlash.
Yeah, or in the pattern changes that will be necessary. Because there may not be backlash, but we're thinking there's going to be. Our assumptions is that there's going to be disruption, there's going to be backlash, there's going to be this. That might not be the truth. That might only be our story. Yeah. And yet that's what's preventing us from letting that truth be true. And then, I mean, you go back to thinking about that person who is on the LGBTQ spectrum, and look at that. Like, that would be a really amazing thing that truth is real. And if I let this truth surface, and if I own this truth, you can imagine that the repercussions that they're picturing in their minds around their relationships and their patterns and their daily routines would be, the story in your brain, in your mind, would be big.
Which is exactly what we've been talking about too, then, isn't it? We're disconnected from our spirit and our body if we are focusing on that negative narrative or that negative story that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think that sort of like that idea, like one of these quotes was mind, one of them was body, one of them was soul. But really what we're saying is that if there is a quote that you want to write on your sticky note and put it on your mirror or throw it on the front of your journal, then allow yourself to really investigate its deeper meaning in your world. because you're drawn to it for a reason.
Yeah. I don't know about anyone else, but my go-to when someone says, where do you find these things? I don't, they find me, which is true though. We're seeking some bit of knowledge or some understanding, and then it increases our awareness. And then these messages, we take note of them. So we are searching for the quotes that come to us, I think.
So maybe this is when you get connected to self, and when you are connected then into your higher wisdom, then that whole idea of confirmation bias, where you're gathering information from the external world to confirm the belief that you already have. Maybe this is when confirmation bias starts to be a really good thing.
Yeah.
Huh.
I think you would call that the law of attraction.
Oh yeah, okay. There we go. There's a different way to frame it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that that's true. Well, I mean, I've noticed that that's true in my life. I've had moments of, if the next number of years look like the past number of years, this is not a place I want to be, and I don't want to do this. I've had that moment, that line in the sand of big change needing to happen in my life in order for me to even want to move forward. And bringing that down to the micro level, when we're talking about developing the habits that we're developing, that is, I think, those baby steps that we talk about taking in moving forward into a life that is, for me, more positive in its orientation. So my umbrella statement for all of this is the habits that we are developing, the investigations that we are doing, the awareness and the awakening that is happening is allowing me to find joyful moments, even in the midst of absolute chaos, because life is not always, a straight line of happiness. There are bumps in the road. There are things that come at us that are beyond our control. And I'm able to find more balance and more sense of peace and more happiness. And I find that the chaos becomes less explosive, maybe is a good way to put it. It's more contained in some way, if that makes any sense, because I'm very quickly changing my mindset about how I'm going to act and react, I guess is a good way to put it. Yeah.
So basically then our goal comes down to, when you see where your current patterns, your current habits have got you here. Mm-hmm. And for you and I right now, that's a good place.
Yeah.
The habits have got us to this place right now, and this is a good place. And yet, I want to be there. You want to be there. And that version of me, that version of you, has a different set of habits. And so it's almost like visioning, what is that person who I'm becoming? What habits does that person have? What motivation can I draw from the wisdom that's come before me to be able to get me there?
That idea that for me, and you correct me because sometimes I do this, but there's more. And I'm not talking about perfection. I'm talking about expansion, I think is what so correct me if I'm not articulating this well, but the me that is me right now can see the me that is coming, and all I can see is, wow, there's more.
Yeah.
More juiciness, more. And I'm not talking about this as like the perfect answer to all problems in life. And I'm saying more in terms of vibrancy, living life to its fullest, getting every bit of enjoyment out of it. And then, yeah, I don't know. I think that's as far as I can go with articulating that. But
when you say the word vibrancy, it draws me right back to that word vibration. And I think that's what we're talking about. It's like the vibration that I'm going to be at when I'm there is going to be a different, more pure version of me than the vibration I'm at here. And this might be leaps and bounds ahead of where I've been. And yet I can feel just like a more juicy vibration coming.
Yeah. And
vibrancy. Yeah.
And I try to watch my language because I'm rooted in perfection. So I really, and you catch me on this, I really am, that's my default, better. So instead of better, I'm looking at it more. I'm looking at vibrant. I'm looking at a higher vibration. It's not for me, because when I couch things in terms of checking off boxes, I guess is really what we're talking about. Of if I do this, everything is going to be like this and it's going to be absolutely perfect. That's where we, crash or fall off the mountain, or whatever analogy you want to use. For me, that's what I'm getting at, is this same life that we're living, but we're living it more expansively. We're more in tune. We're more aware. Our connections are deeper. Our experience is more rooted. And in that moment, I guess, is what I mean.
That's what I love. I do love that about it, because I think that the purposeful experimentation with our daily patterns is what allows us to see the choice we have for more expansion, and an ability to know which choices move us towards expansion. And we can see the contrast between the choice that doesn't create expansion and the choice that does. And when those kind of puzzle pieces fall into place in our daily routines, we are moving towards that vibrancy.
And the aha moment is that difference between stumbling through my life. That's what it felt like. And you use the word purposeful. I use the word intentional, intentionally living my life. And that's a word that is sort of seeping into almost every part of my life. And a lot of my conversations too, is to be intentional. What do you want? How do you feel? What do you need?
And that's what habit experimentation does, isn't it? Is because it makes you more intentional, and it gets rid of the stumbling, because you are aware of the result of an action. You know that this action has this result. You know that this action has this result. Like every scientist out there, that's what they're studying. This is my hypothesis. This is what I'm going to this is what theory, or what I'm going to trial. This is what my experiment is going to be. And then you collect the results. Yeah. So good chatting with you, Jeannette. Do you have any last minute wrap up thoughts on anything right now?
No, I think we've covered a lot, as we usually do. And I apologize for any meanders, because that's how it goes.
But I think part of the meandering, Jeannette, for me anyway, is that these are things that we haven't been taught to talk about. These are connections that we're just starting to understand. And that's why this whole idea of hearing the quotes of people who have come before us and worked through this is so meaningful, is because they're giving us vocabulary, context, a paradigm for something that we don't know how to navigate. And when you find yourself drawn to a quote or an author or a podcaster or something who is putting into words a life experience that you're just starting to tune into, and they're talking about it, being able to articulate it, it gives power to our own experience. Yeah. And so I think that's why we stumble, and that's why we meander, is because we're just learning the vocabulary for this expansion the expansive journey, this vibrant journey that we're on. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, so cool. Yay. Thanks for chatting with me today.
Always fun. I love it. Thanks,
We'll
Jeff.
talk to you soon.